guy was super creepy.
Protectors of the Endless is the latest version of the Iron Council in Ulduar or the Bug Trio in Anchorage, where depending on which boss you kill last, the loot table changes. While it's easy to get overwhelmed by the number of combinations, to keep it simple, there's a combination that is the easiest, there's a combination that is the most optimal for best loot, and then there is an optimal combination to getting the achievement completed, which will require the last boss to be killed that is neither the easiest nor the best loot. In this video demonstration, the visuals will largely align to the hardest best loot combination, with the assumption that by the time we're trying to do the achievement, we all get it and we can adjust the specifics live. Getting into the actual fight, in Heroic only, there's an added mechanic that is worth mentioning up front because it will cloud your ability to do everything else that we will discuss. Simply put, every 15 seconds, a fear minion will spawn on the next platform and start walking towards the lowest life of the protectors. However, while we do want to kill these minions, when they die, they distribute a debuff to the closest 5 people in the raid that is actually a positive debuff. You get a stacking damage increase. However, if your individual debuff stack reaches 10 or higher, you will explode the raid and cause a wipe. Because of this, we're going to have a pre-made set of 5 groups that will rotate in a certain pattern to intercept and kill and soak a number of stacks at a time. The exact number is going to be finessed as we learn more about the fight. However, we expect it to be about 2 or 3 stacks per rotation of groups. So that means 2 or 3 of these minions will be killed over a span of 30 to 45 seconds, and then a new group will come in and take their sets, rotating, so that nobody ever actually hits the 10 that explodes the raid. So as we go into the actual boss mechanics, just remember that everything we see here visually also is layered with the fact that you as a group assignee will have to rotate to kill fears throughout this whole fight every 1.5 to 2 minutes per group based on that rotation rate. Okay, now talking about the bosses themselves in what I'm going to call phase 1, that is the phase where all 3 are still alive. Each boss brings 1 or 2 different mechanics that has to be dealt with. The protectors' names are Cowlin, Regale, and Asani. However, to keep it simple, we'll refer to them as K, R, and A. So we'll have one tank just take K off to the side, and the other tank take both R and A. When we're going for the best gear, we have to kill K last of the 3, and so K will be doing Touch of Shaw for the rest of the fight, and that is every 20 seconds it'll debuff a random raider and begin doing a shadow dot every 3 seconds, and it cannot be dispelled, and it lasts until he's killed. Therefore, this ability, lasting the whole fight, acts as a softened rage where eventually just about everybody by the end of a heroic optimal loot kill will have Touch of Shaw, so healers will just constantly have to build their coverage on this ticking dot on everybody. Now R, which is tanked alongside of A, does 2 abilities. One is called Lightning Bolt, which is an interruptible current target attack on the tank, must always be kicked. The other one it does is Lightning Prism, which puts a debuff on 5 random raiders, which will stun them and taking nature damage to them and all players within 7 yards of them for 8 seconds. However, this is fully dispellable off players, and so people who have those abilities, please do it immediately. That being said, this is one reason why we default to a spread position in this fight. Yet because R is our primary kill target in this phase when we're getting the best loot order, these abilities are only relevant in this first edition of the fight. Finally, A does 2 abilities. One is Water Bolt, which is on a random raider's location where it hits the position with high damage to all standing within 3 yards of the point, so you must dodge it. However, this is also kickable. So ideally, both R and A's kickable abilities are constantly being kicked. However, at least A is fully dodgeable by the raiders, and so just be aware that if one gets through, dodge it. The last thing that A does is called Cleansing Waters, where a globe of water will spawn on in the air above one of the current bosses, and it will slowly fall to the ground. And while this is occurring, there's a zone underneath the boss that appears, and any boss that is left within this zone gets a very powerful heal to them. And so it's important for tanks to acknowledge when the cleansing waters is above them and quickly move the bosses outside of that heal spot. This also puts a buff on the boss that will increase healing received by 50% for 30 seconds. This is also dispellable off the boss. When the first boss is killed, we have 2 left, so any ability that the one that was killed has been doing is no longer on the table. However, the 2 that are still alive will now have an additional set of abilities on top of what they were already doing. Now, in most scenarios, R will have been killed first, but if we're doing the achievement, he has to be killed last. And so just to note, in that scenario, he does an ability called Lightning Storm every 50 seconds, which does a radiating zone denial from around the center of his body. It's similar to Ragnaros in Firelands, where there's a close ring and then it goes to a medium ring and then it goes to a far ring. It's the same concept, just from his character body. However, in most scenarios, he'll be dead. And so what are the ones that are remaining? If K is alive, which should be when we're getting the best loot, he does Defile Ground, which simply put, he does a Void Zone under a random raider every so often. You must move it out, because if you stay in it, you get a really bad debuff along with damage. So just never touch the Void Zones once they're there, and they last the rest of the fight. And while A is still alive, he does what's called Corrupted Waters, which spawns every so often a globe of water in the middle of the map that buffs the melee and casting speed of the bosses by 50% while it's alive. However, it can be killed and must be killed immediately, both to reduce the damage that the raid is taking from the bosses themselves, but also when it dies, it buffs us as raiders within 15 yards of it with 25% melee and casting speed for 20 seconds. And so we got to swap to it, kill it immediately, get a buff, and use that damage onto whatever we're trying to kill at the time. Now, if we're going for the optimal loot order, we are killing A for the second boss. This will leave K as the last boss. And when K is the last boss, of course, he's been doing Touch of Shaw this whole time, and he continues to do it in the last phase, if you want to call it a phase. But in addition, every 40 seconds he does Expel Corruption, which means that an orb, big shadow orb, will spawn wherever the boss is. It deals massive AoE damage every 1.5 seconds in a 30-yard radius, and it lasts in position the whole fight. And so the tanks will have to immediately react to the spawn of a new shadow orb and move the boss and everybody with it to a completely clean part of the map. You wait there, you continue to kill him, it's a Zerg, and then if a new shadow orb spawns, you move to another open spot, and you do this until either the boss is dead or we've run out of space. And just for the completion of it, if perhaps one of the other 2 were the last at this point, they would continue doing whatever they've been doing the whole fight. But in addition, there would be an added stacking raid debuff that does increasing shadow damage until the end of the fight, which acts as a softened rage. And in this scenario, it's because there hasn't been this Touch of Shaw the whole time, because K was killed probably first.